It is bounce back season and players are ready to rebound, so let's talk about bounce back candidates for 2026, whose production was wildly underwhelming for their expectations last year, but they are in line for a better output this year. We've got guys who dealt with injuries last season, guys who dealt with regression, and of course, guys who dealt with their offense being a complete mess. So let's dive in. Let's do a 2-for-1 here with Terry McLaurin and Jayden Daniels. So there is a lot to talk about here. Both of these guys dealt with injuries and underwhelming production when they were actually healthy. With Jayden Daniels, the injury concerns center around his durability. His build was a big question mark as a prospect because of concerns about how it would hold up in the NFL. Year one did not have any major issues. He did play through an injury, but it wasn't a big deal. And then multiple injuries in year two. But the bigger concern here was the clear regression compared to his rookie season. The upside vanished. Now, it was just 7 games, so it's tough to make a full assessment, but it was concerning, particularly because his ADP is still extremely high. I do like his odds to bounce back, but I will not lie on this one. At his ADP, I do find myself often passing over him for better value. Now, when it comes to Terry McLaurin, his injury concerns are different because injuries plus age really make people panic that the player has hit a wall. But there is a logical explanation for the injury and only playing 10 games. When players push their contract holdouts right up until the beginning of the season, I raise major red flags. And I did raise those red flags last year because it's never a good thing to not be participating in team activities. Training camp and preseason preparation does matter, and it's not unusual for guys who hold out extremely late to then get off to a slow start or get injured. So it's very possible that that was the issue and it's not an age thing. I actually don't mind Terry McLaurin at his ADP. We're getting a discount because of the down season and his age. He is the unquestioned wide receiver one of that team. And even if and when they do add a guy like Stephon Diggs or Brandon Ayuk in his delusional world, Terry McLaurin is still the guy in that offense. And we saw Jayden Daniels give Terry McLaurin a career year, nearly doubling his best season in terms of touchdowns. At cost, Terry McLaurin is good value. I've talked a ton about the Bucs receivers this offseason, but we haven't talked about Baker Mayfield. No. Naturally, if I like Emeka Ibuka and I like Ted Hurst and I even like Jalen McMillan if Godwin does end up falling off or getting injured, or I like Godwin if he stays healthy. Hey, if I like all these receivers, what does that mean? That does mean that I am in on a Baker Mayfield bounce back. And quite frankly, we've got an incentivized Baker Mayfield since his contract extension talks stalled, and he was very publicly frustrated with the offers. Disrespected Baker Mayfield is the best version of Baker Mayfield, if we're being honest. He's a fighter. And last year, wasn't great, but it wasn't that bad, people. Let's talk through it. Let's use RotoWire, who is sponsoring this video, to take a look at Baker Mayfield's stats. I'm going to use the player page, which shows you literally everything that you need to know about the player you are searching for. Now, before I dive into Baker's stats, let's talk through what you can find on the RotoWire player page as a whole for deeper analysis on players. At the top, you've got 2025 stats versus 2026 projections. Then you have career stats, which I always find very helpful for identifying baseline expectations versus outlier years. As you can see here on Baker's page, we know that 2024 was an outlier year. It was wonderful, but it was an outlier. It was elevated by, as we can see, a higher completion percentage. And the 2023 year is probably the closer comp to his most logical output. Then you've got fantasy and red zone stats. FYI, I use red zone stats a lot when it comes to running backs and receivers. And then there are advanced NFL stats, game logs using your preference for fantasy scoring, snap distribution, and depth chart, which is very critical for running backs, receivers, and tight ends. Then we've got splits, which is very handy once you get in season, right? Because on a week-to-week basis, you would like to see tendencies versus specific defenses. And then it closes out with measurables and articles and news. Let's jump back in here to the game log for Baker Mayfield. I use game logs a lot to help contextualize a player's season and identify what went right or what went wrong. For Baker Mayfield, the split was very clear. While he was able to somewhat take advantage of a couple of teams in the back half of the season, his consistency took a nosedive. we can see easily that he was playing injured and struggling through it, right? This supports what we know about the fact that injuries happened at a certain point and it kind of derailed the season as a whole for him and the rest of the team. In the first 6 weeks of the season, through what was a very difficult defensive stretch, he had 5 QB1 finishes with only one non QB1 finish, that being QB 15. That is a very good thing. Through the first 11 weeks of the season, he had 7 QB1 finishes. And then through the end of the season, after that point, he had just 1 QB1 finish over what was honestly a fairly not that hard defensive stretch. So this allows us to kind of see and contextualize what went on with Baker Mayfield and understand that the upside is still there for him to be able to bounce back. He just struggled through injuries in the second half of the season. You can have access to all this information as you prep for your draft with RotoWire and use their tools like Fantasy Football Draft Kit, Fantasy Football Draft Assistance, rankings, mock drafts, custom cheat sheets, custom rankings, and so much more. You can access all this information through your phone on the RotoWire app as well. And if you sign up online, you can get 25% off through the link below in the video and use my code TERA, T-E-R-A. Very simple. Gets you access to amazing tools, and it's also a great way to support my channel as well. Win-win. So again, on Baker Mayfield, we should see a natural bounce back here because more than likely it really was just an injury issue with some regression because 41 touchdowns in 2024 was just kind of crazy. He is set for a nice bounce back here with young, promising talent and an offensive coordinator upgrade to Zach Robinson, who stems from Sean McVay. So this is a nice natural fit for Tampa Bay's offense and Baker Mayfield specifically, who has really benefited from coaching that has stemmed from Sean McVay. Now, we know who Justin Jefferson is. We question nothing about him. There would be no bounce back if it were just Justin Jefferson because he would be elite 24/7. But we question if any quarterback on roster can actually throw within his catching radius. I have trust issues with Kyler Murray. I am sure I'm not the only one on that one. While I am 100% confident that he can supply a wide receiver one if he's on the field, it's just been a while. Now, to be fair, there were legitimate reasons why it's been a while. Coaching obviously was an issue. Marvin Harrison Jr. had inconsistencies. Marquise Hollywood-Brown was the wide receiver one for a second. That tells you all you need to know. That's not a wide receiver one. Christian Kirk was the wide receiver one. Again, not a wide receiver one. And then DeAndre Hopkins played only one healthy season. He was there, but he only had one healthy full season, and that was a strong season. That was a wide receiver one season. So, theoretically, a prime Justin Jefferson should have no problem with Kyler Murray, and he will definitely outperform his previous season. While Kyler and JJ McCarthy are splitting reps right now, I do ultimately think that Kyler is going to win this job, and this is just Kevin O'Connell being respectful of the process with his former round one pick, just in case there is actual progress and development from him. And when Kyler does win the job, we can feel more comfortable. Our only question would be, how much do we trust Kyler to actually play a full healthy season? But this is where our trust in Kevin O'Connell has to come through. He's a fixer, and Kyler does fit the mold of something that he can fix, right? And Justin Jefferson has had or paced a minimum of 1,400 yards in every single season he has played, with the exception of last season. To help further put your mind at ease, the one knock on Kyler is that he is allergic to passing touchdowns for a wide receiver one. For as great as the volume was with Hopkins, he only had 6 touchdowns, right? So it makes sense. And then we know Trey McBride's touchdowns were minimized until Jacoby Brissett came along. But Justin Jefferson is a volume guy, and we can live very easily with 160 targets, 1,500 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Mathematically, that'll work. So you guys have heard me talk about the risk of regression when it comes to players coming off of outlier workload years. That is why I'm not concerned or panicked about Saquon Barkley's down season in 2025. Barkley had an absolutely ridiculous workload of 345 carries, over 2,000 yards, over 10 rushing touchdowns, plus postseason work in 2024 all the way to the Super Bowl. And then he turned around and, not surprisingly, had under 300 carries, just over 1,100 yards, and 7 rushing touchdowns, which is a very dramatic dip in production and efficiency. And while that has caused some people to think that the end is near for Barkley, take advantage and lean into this bounce back under fresher legs in 2026. The workload will come up this season, and that is with very good reason. It is not just speculation. The Eagles' offensive struggles were not just Saquon. It wasn't like everybody else was thriving. The offense as a whole was being very poorly run. Sean Mannion as offensive coordinator is a significant upgrade specifically for Saquon Barkley. Mannion comes from Green Bay, a team that has skewed about as run heavy as you can get, with a clear 3-down back in Josh Jacobs, and has provided ample goal line opportunities. He was literally, before his injury last season, the safest bet for an anytime touchdown. The ample goal line opportunities and better offensive flow will help counteract the tush-push sniping. And with the exit of A.J. Brown, the Eagles are sculpting their new identity in the receiving core. Because remember, Mekhi Lemon is not a one-for-one physical replacement of A.J. Brown. They're different players. So as they work through this new pass game and new players and new alignments, it only makes sense to lean into the ground game. Saquon is primed for a bounce back. Training camp is in full swing, and if you are looking online, you might be concerned about Marvin Harrison Jr. because, as we talked about with Quentin Johnston, when everyone has preconceived judgments of you for drops, that is all your highlights are going to be. If you drop the ball in camp, that video will be circulated 10 times over. Drops for Marvin Harrison Jr. get big clicks. That is all that you will see. So take what you see with a grain of salt, right? Because people are trying to make money. Marvin Harrison Jr. has, though, had very egregious and strange mental lapses and drops last season. It was bad, right? And he knows it was bad. This is not anything that is a surprise. So it is particularly concerning, right? Because it's different than the Quentin Johnston situation where that coaching staff is clearly invested in him. This isn't brand new coaching staff in Arizona. They have no loyalty to him. And it doesn't help when there's a wide receiver too who had a crazy breakout in his absence, looking very good in camp. All that said, there are plenty of positive highlights out there as well. You just got to search for them. And he's clearly the wide receiver one, despite what you might think or what you might want. They still view him as the wide receiver one. And we did get the Jacoby Brissett contract. Yay. Now, at some point, we will see Carson Beck because the Cardinals have to play him in the regular season so they know if something is there. So that does incur some risk, right? Because any rookie with wide receivers incurs risk. But with Brissett, we have a very good idea of what will happen. Brissett was a godsend for our fantasy assets last season. The Cardinals have a brutal schedule, meaning that they will be chasing points because they will be severely outmatched for the vast majority of the season. Brissett can throw 40-plus attempts a game with ease and give us fantasy points on top of fantasy points. Now, it's tough to assess Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jacoby Brissett together last season because Marvin Harrison Jr. was concussed for Brissett's first start, and the second game was against Green Bay. I've said that before. They have a penchant for strategically clamping down wide receiver ones, and then he got injured. When he did return, he was clearly playing limited and injured. So don't panic by saying that Marvin Harrison Jr. last season with Jacoby Brissett was a failure. There were positive games in the tiny little pocket that we had, and in that pocket, he was clearly the wide receiver one and did garner a high target share. So again, it's more nuanced, right? But we're drafting him as a low-end wide receiver 3, a flex option. At ADP, it's not really that big of a risk. And someone who is going just a few spots ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr. in ADP, Brian Thomas Jr., all the juniors. Apples to oranges, I do prefer Parker Washington, and I'm not going to change that. I'm not. But that doesn't mean that we cannot have a good season for Parker Washington and a bounce-back season for BTJ. We just have to be very reasonable about expectations. Like with Marvin Harrison Jr., we can acknowledge the potential bounce back odds for him, in terms of clearly out targeting Trey McBride are not great. It's not going to happen more than likely, right? For Brian Thomas Jr., bounce back season, but probably not top 10 because the Jags have so much depth at receiver. So because of that, their receivers have capped ceilings, but that is also why they have lower ADP. So it works out, right? We're not having to pay an egregious level for these assets that are a little bit more volatile. Thomas was playing injured last season, so you can make the excuse that that is why he had the nasty regression from his rookie season. He claims he is healthy now. We know the upside he offers. So if his ADP does not elevate past that of a mid to low end wide receiver 3, I could see myself drafting him. Again, I do prefer Parker Washington, but I'm not opposed to it, right? Because he is the wide receiver 1. It's just that the wide receiver 1 in this Liam Cohen offense doesn't get an aggressive target funnel, And the slot was actually extremely profitable last season, hence why Parker Washington had the breakout. So BTJ doesn't have a path towards massive JSN type of target share, but he can put up top 24 numbers and bounce back and outperform last season. I can see a 1,100 yards, 7 touchdown type of season, 8 touchdown maybe type of season in line for him. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. You can find me across all social media platforms at It's Tera Time, so make sure that you're locked in, tune in, subscribe, turn on notifications, and all that good stuff. And also make sure to take advantage of that 25% off at RotoWire with code Tera, T-E-R-A, and use the link below in the description. Thank you for watching this video. We'll talk to you again later, guys.